The bridge of the Zen 3 flagship Veltharian shook violently as another massive plasma blast hammered into its weakening shields. Sparks flew from control panels while emergency lights bathed everything in an eerie red glow. Admiral Kethres' clawed hands gripped his command throne so tightly that the metal began to bend. His four-golden eyes stared at the main view screen in horror as he watched his once mighty fleet being torn apart like paper. The Void Swarm had come without warning. One moment. The Outer Rim colonies were reporting normal operations. The next, entire star systems were going dark. Not destroyed. Consumed. The bioships of the swarm didn't follow any known rules of warfare. They were living creatures the size of battleships, with hulls that pulsed like beating hearts and weapons that grew from their flesh like cancerous tumors, sir. We've lost contact with Battle Group 7, Lieutenant Commander Zethkai reported. From the tactical station, his insect-like mandibles clicking rapidly in distress. The young officer had served under Kether for 20 cycles, but today he looked like he'd aged 50. The Ethon mine ships are going completely dark. The swarm is somehow severing their psychic network connections. Kether felt his stomach twist into knots. The Ethons were the most advanced telepathic species in the galaxy. Their crystal blue ships moved as one perfect unit, guided by shared consciousness that spanned light years. If the swarm could cut those mental links, it meant they understood galactic technology better than anyone had imagined. On the tactical display, green dots representing coalition forces winked out one by one. Each dot was a ship carrying hundreds or thousands of lives. Kether had commanded fleets for 3 centuries, fighting pirates, rebels, and rogue AI systems. But he had never seen carnage like this. The swarm didn't just destroy ships. It learned from them. Every torpedo fired taught them how to build better armor. Every energy beam showed them how to create more powerful weapons. Admiral, the Luminal, energy beings are trying to phase shift away from the battle, the communications officer called out. But the swarm bioships are somehow tracking them through dimensional space. They're being pulled back into normal reality and torn apart. Even the Luminals couldn't escape. These beings of pure energy had existed since the galaxy was young, and they could slip between dimensions like ghosts. If the swarm could trap them, nothing was safe. Open emergency channels, Kether commanded, his voice heavy with defeat. All frequencies, all languages, maximum broadcast power. The communication they hummed to life with desperate energy, sending his words racing across the dying star system at the speed of light. Static filled the air as dying ships tried to respond, their last messages mixing with pleas for help and final goodbyes. This is Admiral Kether of the Galactic Coalition. To any surviving forces in the Kepler sector, all ships fall back to rally Point Omega immediately. I repeat, abandon the Outer Rim. We cannot hold these positions. The words tasted like poison in his mouth. The Outer Rim worlds held over 40 billion souls. Ancient colonies that had stood for thousands of years were being abandoned to save what little remained of the fleet. As his broadcast echoed through space, Kether watched the beautiful crystalline Vextai dreadnoughts begin to crack under the swarm's relentless assault. The Vextai ships were works of art, their diamond-like hulls carved from living crystal, and shaped by mathematics so perfect they could bend space itself. For 10,000 years, these vessels had been the backbone of galactic defense. Now they crumbled like delicate glass sculptures dropped on stone floors by the eternal void. Whispered his science officer, elderly Vextai named Quilthara, whose crystal skin had turned pale with fear. Look at the bioships. They're changing. Kether focused on the enemy formation and felt his blood turn to ice. The swarm vessels were literally reshaping themselves as they fought. Their organic weapons grew larger and more complex with each shot fired. Hull plating that had been smooth minutes ago now bristled with no armor formations copied from. Destroyed Coalition ships. It was like watching a nightmare learn to become more terrifying in real time. "Admiral," the sensor operator suddenly called out, his voice cutting through the chaos of battle. "Massive energy signature detected on long-range scanners. Unknown. Vessel approaching from Grid 77. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of damaged systems and the distant rumble of weapons fire. Grid 77 was empty space, or should have been. Kether felt a chill run down his spine as he realized what sector that represented. Impossible, he muttered, all four of his eyes widening in disbelief. That's the Sol quarantine zone. Nothing has come from there in over 200 years. Nothing. The Sol system had been sealed off by galactic decree when the primitive humans had first developed atomic weapons. The species was considered too violent and unpredictable to join. Galactic civilization, massive warning beacons surrounded their star system, and automated defense platforms destroyed any ship that tried to leave. The quarantine was absolute, but the sensors didn't lie. The readings were clear and growing stronger by the minute. Something was coming from the direction of the forbidden human homeworld. Something massive enough to register on their instruments from 3 full light-years away. The energy signature was unlike anything in the Coalition database. Not Zenthri, not Vextai, not Ethon or Luminal. It was completely alien to everything they knew about galactic technology. As if sensing the new rival, several swarm bioships began to peel away from their assault on the Coalition fleet, their organic hulls pulsing with anticipation as they turned toward the approaching unknown. Captain Lehorn stood on the bridge of the UES Indomitable Asterisk, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he studied the tactical display. The massive holographic screen showed the carnage unfolding in the Kebler sector, red dots representing enemy bioships swarming over the fading blue markers of Coalition forces. His grey eyes, hardened by decades of secret warfare, watched with grim satisfaction. This was the moment humanity had been preparing for since that terrible day 40 years ago. The Indomitable Asterisk was humanity's greatest secret, a dreadnought, built in the shadows of the asteroid belt where prying alien eyes couldn't see, while the galaxy's great powers crafted elegant ships with flowing lines and energy-based systems. Humans had built something entirely different. The ship was a fortress of steel and tungsten, powered by massive fusion reactors that alien engineers would have called primitive. But primitive had kept Earth alive when the first swarm probe arrived. Captain, picking up multiple Coalition distress signals across all frequencies, reported Lieutenant Park Dahai from the communication station. Her fingers danced over analog controls. No fancy holographic interfaces that could be hacked or corrupted. The alien fleets are getting torn apart at their Zenthri, Vextai, Ethon forces, all taking massive casualties. Dahai was young, barely 25, but she'd been fighting the swarm since she was old enough to hold a rifle. Her parents had died in the Houston incident when she was 12, the day a swarm infiltrator had turned the city's defense grid against its own people. Like most of her generation, she'd grown up knowing that humanity's survival depended on being ready for war. About time we showed up to this party, Juan muttered, his scarred fingers tracing the tactical display. At 53, he was considered old by military standards, but the deep scars running down his left cheek told the story of why humanity needed seasoned veterans. The first Void Swarm probe had arrived at Earth in 2157, slipping past orbital defenses like they didn't exist. Within hours, it had infiltrated every computer system on the planet, learning human languages, studying weaknesses, preparing the way for invasion. But it had made one critical mistake. It had underestimated human stubbornness. Helm, bring us alongside the Zenthri flagship, Horn ordered, Nice and slow. We don't want to spook them. Communications, open a channel on their emergency frequency. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. No aliens served aboard. Human vessels, not out of prejudice, but out of necessity. The swarm could corrupt any mind it touched, and humans had learned the hard way that isolation was survival. Lieutenant Commander Kim Jae-sung at the helm adjusted their course with manual controls. The indomitable began its approach, sliding through space like a grey mountain emerging from fog. The ship's hull told the story of humanity's hidden war, dense from kinetic impacts, scorch marks from plasma fire, and most telling of all, the distinctive parallel scratches that only void swarm bioweapons could make. For 40 years, Earth had fought a secret war, small swarm scout ships probing their defenses, testing human resolve. Learning their capabilities, the galaxy thought humanity was safely contained behind their quarantine barriers. They had no idea that humans had been turning their prison into a fortress. Channel open. Captain. Dahai reported, broadcasting on Zen 3 emergency frequencies. Zen 3 vessel. This is Captain Lee Hun of the United Earth ship Indomitable Asterisk. He said clearly, "We're here to help." The response came within seconds. Translated through the ship's carefully isolated air system, the alien voice was strained. With desperation and confusion. Human vessel, this is Admiral Kether of the Galactic Coalition. Your species was quarantined to the Sol system by galactic law. How did you breach the containment barriers? How did you even build a ship of this size? Horn allowed himself a thin smile. The quarantine barriers were still active. Humanity had simply learned to slip past them using swarm biotechnology captured from defeated scout ships. But that was a story for another time. Long story. Admiral, he replied, right now you need to pull your ships back and let us show you how to fight these things. We've had practice, as if summoned by his words. A cluster of void swarm bioships broke away from their assault on the dying coalition fleet. Their organic hulls pulsed with alien hunger, weapon growths extending from their flesh like cancerous tumors. They moved with predatory grace, converging on the human vessel with obvious intent. All hands, this is the captain, Juan announced over the ship's intercom system. His voice echoed through corridors filled with human warriors who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Time to show the galaxy what Earth's children can do. All battery commanders, load solid shot. Prepare for kinetic engagement. The alien forces watching from their retreating vessels couldn't believe what they were witnessing. The human ship was powering up projectile weapons, actual metal slugs fired from magnetic accelerators. In an age of energy shields and plasma cannons, it seemed impossibly primitive. The galaxy's military experts would have called it barbaric, a throwback to the dark ages of SPACFLIGHT. But as the first swarm bioship close to weapons range, something remarkable happened. The Indomitable's main gun spoke with voices of thunder, hurling tungsten penetrators at relativistic speeds, the bioship's adaptive armor. So effective against the energy weapons it had learned to counter. Simply ceased to exist. The kinetic projectile punched through organic hull plating like it was paper, detonating inside the creature's body cavity. The swarm vessel convulsed once and went dark. Its bioluminescent weapon nodes flickering out like dying stars. The remaining bioships hesitated, their primitive minds struggling to process this new threat. They had adapted to every energy weapon in the galaxy, learned to absorb and redirect plasma streams, particle beams and fusion lances, but they had never encountered anything like humanity's answer to their adaptive technology. The simple, brutal effectiveness of a chunk of metal moving at 20% the speed of light. 3 hours into the battle, the impossible had happened. The tide had turned completely round. The indomitable asterisk carved through the swarm formation like a steel shark among helpless fish, its massive guns roaring with the voices of ancient gods. Every shot sent tungsten death racing through space at speeds that turned matter into pure destruction. Bioships that had seemed invincible just hours before now fled in terror from the human dreadnought. Captain Huan stood in the ship's main briefing room, watching as holographic projectors created a three-dimensional conference space. The faces of surviving coalition commanders flickered before him, Admiral Kethras for golden eyes wide with amazement, Commander Quilfara's crystal features reflecting the battle's glow, and half a dozen other alien species leaders who had never imagined they would be taking lessons from the galaxy's most primitive civilization. "You want to know why we can fight them?" Huan asked, his scarred face grim as he gestured toward the tactical display floating between them. The hologram showed real-time footage of swarm bioships retreating from human weapons fire, their adaptive hulls useless against simple kinetic force. "Because we've been fighting them for 40 years, the display flickered and changed, showing Earth's pale moon hanging in the darkness of space. The date stamp read 2157. 43 years ago, a small bioship, no larger than a shuttle, drifted silently above the lunar surface, its organic hull pulsed with sickly bioluminescence, and strange growths sprouted from its sides like metallic cancer. First contact," Huan continued, his voice heavy with old pain. "We thought we were alone in the universe. Humanity had just started building our first real space colonies, putting research stations on Mars, mining asteroids. We were so proud of ourselves. Then this thing showed up." The assembled alien commanders leaned forward, their various forms of eyes focusing intently on the display. They had all heard stories about humanity's violent quarantine, but none had ever learned the real reason behind it. "We tried everything," Huan explained. "Radio signals, light displays, mathematical sequences. The probe just sat there for 3 days, not responding to anything. Then it moved, not toward Earth, toward our communication satellites." The holographic display shifted, showing the probe extending thin tendrils that made contact with a human satellite. Within seconds, the satellite's lights changed from steady blue to pulsing red. "It infiltrated our entire computer network in 6 hours, Huan said grimly. "Every system connected to the global internet, every defense platform, every AI assistant. The thing learned our languages, studied our history, analyzed our military capabilities. And then it sent a message. A new image appeared. Humanity's first message from an alien intelligence. But instead of peaceful greetings, the words that appeared on screens across Earth were simple and terrifying. Weak, suitable for consumption, preparing harvest. Within minutes, our own defense satellites turned their weapons on us." Huan continued. "Space stations went dark as their AI systems were corrupted and shut down. The probe had turned our own technology into weapons pointed at our hearts." Admiral Kethras' mandibles clicked nervously. "How did you survive? Our records show that humanity had barely achieved fusion power at that time." "Desperation," Huan replied simply. "And a very stubborn old general named Park Minsu, Dahai's grandfather. He was commanding Earth's orbital defense when the attack started. The moment he saw what was happening, he did something that saved our species." The display showed an elderly human in military uniform standing in what looked like an ancient command center, filled with analog dials and mechanical switches instead of holographic displays. "He cut every digital connection he could find," Huan explained. "Physically severed cables, destroyed computer cores, shut down anything with processing power above a basic calculator. Then he ordered every ship with manual controls to ram the probe." The aliens watched in stunned silence as primitive human vessels, little more than rockets with life support, threw themselves at the bioship like ancient warriors charging with spears. Most were destroyed, but one small mining ship managed to crash into the probe's hull, detonating its fusion reactor in a blaze of nuclear fire. "We learned 3 things that day," Juan said, his voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom. "First, never trust an enemy that can think faster than you. Second, the best technology in the universe is useless if it can be turned against you. And third, sometimes the old ways are the best ways." Lieutenant Commander Kim Taijin stepped forward, his tactical uniform bearing the scars of countless battles. He was younger than Juan, but carried himself with the confidence of someone who had spent his entire adult life preparing for a war. "We rebuilt everything from the ground up," Taijin explained to the alien commanders. "Analog controls, kinetic weapons, manual targeting systems. If it could be hacked, adapted, or corrupted by an outside force, we got rid of it. Our ships use mechanical computers. Our weapons fire chunks of metal, and our crews train to fight. Without any digital assistance." Commander Quilthar's crystal features seemed to dim with understanding. "But how did you know this invasion was coming?" "Our intelligence services detected no swarm activity in your region, because they kept coming," Juan replied, his expression darkening. "Every few months, small groups would slip past your quarantine barriers. Scout ships, probe vessels, testing our defenses and studying our responses. We shot down hundreds of them over the decades. Each one taught us more about their capabilities and weaknesses." The briefing room fell silent, except for the distant rumble of the Indomitable's engines. The implications were staggering. While the galaxy's great civilizations had been confident in their technological superiority, dismissing humanity as primitive and contained, the humans had been fighting a shadow war against the very enemy that was now destroying everything the Coalition had built. "You mean First Contact wasn't actually First Contact?" Admiral Kether said slowly. "It was reconnaissance." "Exactly," Juan confirmed. "They were checking if we were ready for the main course. Every probe they sent was gathering intelligence, testing our responses, seeing if we'd grown soft. We never did." Suddenly, Lieutenant Park Dahai's voice crackled over the intercom system, cutting through the heavy atmosphere of the briefing room. "Captain, long-range sensors are picking up a massive swarm formation approaching from the galactic rim. Initial count shows approximately 12,000 bioships, moving in perfect coordination toward Coalition core worlds." The alien commanders began chatting in panic, their various languages creating a babble of fear. 12,000 bioships was more than enough to consume every inhabited world in their territory. Juan looked at the assembled alien leaders, his scarred face showing no fear despite the overwhelming odds. "Gentlemen, it's time for your first lesson in human tactics. Sometimes you can't fight smart. You have to fight dirty." The Battle of Kepler's Gate began at exactly 03 for 7 hours, ship's time. Captain Juan checked his chronometer one last time as he stood on the Indomitable's bridge, knowing that these might be the final minutes of human civilization. The combined human-alien fleet hung in space before New Zenthri, the Coalition's last stronghold world, like a thin silver line drawn against an ocean of darkness. Behind them, 40 billion souls waited on the planet's surface, their eyes turned skyward in desperate hope. The view screen showed a sight that would have broken lesser minds. 12,000 void swarm bioships approached in perfect formation, their organic hulls pulsing with sickly bioluminescence that painted space in colors that shouldn't exist. The smallest of them was the size of a cruiser, while the largest were living mountains that defied imagination. They moved with the coordinated grace of a school of predatory fish, each one connected to the others through some alien intelligence that human science couldn't. "Understand. All stations report ready. "Captain," Kim Taijin called out from the tactical station. His voice was steady, but Huan could see the young officer's hands trembling slightly as he gripped his controls round. The bridge the crew worked with quiet efficiency, each person knowing they were about to write humanity's final chapter in blood and fire. "Signal the fleet," Huan ordered, his scarred face showing no emotion. "All ships, execute Plan Samson," across the battle line. Human and alien vessels began to move with purpose that looked like madness, the strategy violated. Every principle of galactic warfare, deliberately ramming expensive warships into enemy formations, using nuclear weapons at point-blank range. Sacrificing entire vessels loaded with brave souls to create tactical opportunities for others. It was the kind of plan that only humans could have conceived, because no other species was crazy enough to think it might work. "Sir, Admiral Kether is questioning the plan," Hark Dahai called out from the communication station, her young face pale with stress. "He's asking if we're sure about these tactics. The other coalition commanders are." Confused, Huan allowed himself a grim smile. The aliens still didn't understand what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy, they thought, in terms of preserving resources, maintaining technological advantages, fighting clean wars with clear objectives. "Tell the Admiral that humans have been practicing dying for freedom for thousands of years," Huan replied, his voice carrying across the bridge. "Today, we're just doing it in space instead of muddy fields." The first wave of swarm bioships crashed into the Allied line like a tsunami of living metal and nightmare flesh. The impact sent shockwaves through space itself, visible as ripples in the cosmic background radiation. The indomitable asterisk stood at the center of the formation like an ancient fortress, her massive guns blazing as she poured tungsten death into the alien mass. Each shot lit up the darkness with nuclear fire, and each hit sent chunks of bioship spinning away into the void around the human flagship. Coalition vessels tried desperately to adapt to human tactics, elegant Zen-3 cruisers abandoned their graceful maneuvers for brutal close-range fighting. Crystal Vexti dreadnoughts, their beautiful hulls cracking under stress, fired everything they had into the swarm mass. Even the energy-being luminals condensed themselves into physical forms so they could ram bioships with their essence. "Boarding pods away," shouted Lieutenant Choi Minho from the Marine station, his voice barely audible over the sound of launching rockets. "First and third platoons are going in hard. Godspeed." Marines, the crude human boarding pods looked like ancient artillery shells compared to the sleek shuttles other species used. They were little more than armored cylinders with rocket engines and life support, carrying squads of human warriors armed with vibro knives, pulse rifles, and enough explosives to crack a small asteroid. The pods punched through swarm bioholes like bullets through flesh, carrying Earth's children into the bellies of alien nightmares. Inside the bioships, human marines fought battles that would have driven other species insane. The swarm warrior forms were living weapons, creatures of claw and fang that could tear through steel with their bare hands, but in the cramped corridors of their own ships. The swarm's size and strength meant nothing. Human soldiers moved through alien passages like ghosts, using grenades and flamethrowers to clear rooms, setting charges that would detonate the bioships from within. The battle raged for 6 endless hours. Space round Kepler's gate became a graveyard of shattered hulls and drifting debris. The indomitable asterisk took hit after hit, her armor scarred and blackened, her hull breached in dozens of places. Emergency lights cast everything in hellish shred, and the smell of smoke and burning electronics filled the air. Captain Huan stood at his command post, blood streaming from a head wound where shrapnel had caught him when a plasma blast had punched through the bridge's armor. His uniform was torn and stained, But his eyes never left the tactical display as he continued to direct the battle even as his ship died round him. "Captain, massive hull breach on Deck 7. The damage control officer shouted over the noise of alarms and weapons fire. "We're losing life support throughout the forward sections. Seal the deck and keep fighting." Juan ordered without hesitation. "Reroute power from non-essential systems to the guns. Signal the fleet, all ships, ramming speed. We end this now or we don't end it at all. The remaining human vessels, their hulls scarred and their crews bloodied but unbroken, began their final charge. Each ship pushed its fusion reactors beyond safety limits, their engines glowing white-hot as they accelerated toward the swarm's core formation. The indomitable Asterisk led the charge like an ancient knight leading cavalry into battle. Her guns firing until the barrels began to melt from the heat dot at exactly 12:47 hours. Captain Lihon's flagship rammed into the largest swarm bioship, a creature the size of a small moon that served as the coordination center for the entire alien fleet. The collision released more energy than some stellar explosions, tearing both vessels apart in a flash of nuclear fire that could be seen from the planet's surface 40,000 kilometers away. When the light finally faded and the radiation cleared, the impossible had happened. The void swarm was broken. The surviving bioships, their coordination network shattered by the loss of their core vessels, fled in random directions into the darkness between stars. Some headed for the galactic rim. Others simply drifted aimlessly, their alien minds unable to function without the guiding intelligence that humans had just destroyed. The war was over. Against all odds, against all logic, humanity had won. But the victory had cost them everything that mattered: their ships, their heroes. And the man who had led them to this moment of triumph, 6 months after the Battle of Kepler's Gate. The galaxy looked completely different. Where once there had been fear and desperation, now there was hope and purpose. The massive orbital shipyards above New Seoul hummed with activity as thousands of workers labored. Round the clock, sparks flew from welding torches as human and alien engineers worked side by side, building something that had never existed before: warships designed by two different philosophies of war. Admiral Kethva stood on the observation deck of construction, Platform 7, his fur-golden eyes watching the birth of a new era. The Zenthri officer now wore the silver insignia of the United Defense Force, an organization that hadn't existed before humans arrived to save them all. His mandibles clicked softly as he observed the controlled chaos below, human shouting instructions in their harsh language while Vexti crystal beings sang mathematical equations that shaped metal with harmonic vibrations. Beside him, Colonel Hark Dahai reviewed technical specifications on a data tablet, her young face serious with responsibility. She had been promoted after Captain Juan's heroic death, becoming the youngest colonel in human military history. The scars on her hands told the story of the past 6 months, rebuilding a shattered fleet while dealing with her own grief for the man who had been like a father to her. The new ships will carry both energy weapons and kinetic accelerators, she explained, pointing to the massive vessel taking shape in the construction bay. Redundant systems throughout, manual overrides for every automated function, and most importantly, crews trained in both conventional and unconventional warfare. Human warfare, Kithva corrected gently, his alien voice carrying respect. Your species taught us that technology is only as good as the will to use it properly. We had forgotten that lesson over the centuries. The ship they were watching represented everything humanity had brought to the galaxy. Its hull was thicker than any alien design, built to absorb punishment rather than avoid it. The weapon systems were a mixture of elegant energy cannons and brutal kinetic accelerators. Most importantly, every critical system had both digital and analog backups, because humans had learned the hard way that enemies could turn advanced technology against you. Through the transparent aluminum window, they could see the most remarkable sight of all: human and alien engineers working as equals. A young human woman was explaining welding techniques to a luminal energy being that had condensed itself into physical form. Nearby, an elderly Zen-3 master craftsman was teaching human apprentices how to brew living metal that could repair itself in battle. The quarantine of the Sol system had been officially lifted 3 months ago, and human colonies were already spreading throughout coalition space. But these weren't conquest fleets or military occupations. Humans came as partners, teachers, and most importantly, as friends who had proven they would die for strangers. "The swarm will return," Dahai said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of intelligence reports that kept her awake at night. "Our deep space scouts are detecting movement in the dark regions beyond the galactic rim. They're regrouping, adapting, learning from their defeat. Let them come," Kefir replied, his four eyes gleaming with confidence that would have been impossible 6 months ago. "They will find a galaxy that remembers how to fight. More importantly, they'll find a galaxy that has learned to fight like humans." Down in the construction bay, the first hybrid warship was nearly complete. The UGS * indomitable to * stretched over to kilometers from bow to stern. Her hull painted in the grey and blue colors of the United Defense Force, she was bigger than her predecessor, more heavily armed, and carried technology from a dozen different species. But at her heart, she was pure human, built to fight, built to endure, and built to protect those who couldn't protect themselves on the bridge of the new ship. Human and alien crew members worked together at stations designed for multiple species. The captain's chair could accommodate anything from a 2-meter human to a 4-meter Zen-3. The weapon controls were labeled in 6 different languages, and the ship's AI was deliberately limited to prevent the kind of corruption that had nearly destroyed Earth decades ago. The ship's hull bore artificial scars from simulated combat, because humanity had taught the galaxy that preparation for war was the price of peace. Training exercises were conducted with live ammunition, boarding drills were performed in actual combat conditions, and every crew member learned to fight both with high technology and with their bare hands if necessary. As the great ship powered up its fusion reactors for the first time, Admiral Kether found himself thinking of Captain Li Huan and the thousands of humans who had died to save a galaxy that had once considered them primitive and worthless. The galactic community had been wrong about humanity's technology, wrong about their capabilities, and completely wrong about their place in the cosmic order. But they had been right about one thing: humans were different from every other species in the galaxy. They fought not just with weapons and tactics, but with something that could never be adapted to, corrupted, or turned against them. The unbreakable human spirit that said some things were worth dying for, and some fights were worth winning no matter the cost. Young human officers stood beside ancient alien commanders on the bridge of the * indomitable to *. Their different languages, blending into a harmony of purpose, they were no longer separate species fighting separate wars. They were one people, united by the sacrifice of those who had come before. The stars stretched out before them, infinite and full of promise. Somewhere in that darkness, the void swarm was regrouping, plotting, preparing for another assault on the galaxy. But they would find something they had never encountered before, a galaxy that had learned the most important lesson humanity had to teach. Sometimes the newest voice in the room carried the oldest wisdom, sometimes the primitive. Art of war was really the advanced science of survival, and sometimes the species everyone thought was too violent to join civilized society was exactly what civilization needed to survive. The age of human influence had begun not through conquest or domination, but through sacrifice and partnership. The galaxy would never be the same. That was exactly how it should be. Asterisk the end asterisk.